Hi everyone. I've been wanting to do a channeling on the topic of racism. I know it's a topic that different previous channelings have touched upon, but I wanted to do an in-depth channeling on this subject. It's a subject where the spiritual perspective is very different from like the surface level perspective of human unconsciousness that is behind the atrocities that have played out in our history, and that we're still obviously dealing with these days, and trying to transmute and to move into a better place as a species. And one of you has also posted a question on the question form that says, will the racist atrocities projected towards Pan-Africa ever cease? And if so, when could we expect for a more civilized planet? This is a really good question, and the questioner has requested for the Lyrans to answer, but I think this question calls more from advice from the Galactic Council of Light, which the Lyrans are also a part of. It is this family of ascended beings throughout the galaxy, and because they have this diplomatic and sort of, let's say, very consensual energy, I think that they're perhaps better at giving us a full perspective on this difficult topic. So this is the Intergalactic Council of Light on the topic of racism. Your family is here to greet you. We are an extended family reaching out across time and space, and you are also a part of this family. To us, what is playing out on your planet is quite natural. We know this is a strange word to use in your vocabulary, because it seems anything but natural that you would divide people into subcategories and then assign them different values on the basis of their physical appearance. However, notice that this is a pattern that has played out in many civilizations throughout the galaxy. For instance, among the Pleiadians, the racist closest to you in the succession of seed races. It is because the collective ascension process of a species of which all humanity is a part requires first the process of radical separation on a planetary level, on an ecological level, on a technological level, on the social level, in the family unit, at the individual, in their self-perception and the way they see themselves as a separate part of the whole. You could then see the phenomenon of racism as a phenomenon that most clearly expresses the hateful diffusion of energies and emotions that has taken place on your planet throughout your history. That is to say, that this racist separation has been ongoing and growing for the past 5,000 years of your history. The Masonic craft that is the erection of great buildings requires, to some extent, both practically and psychologically, the concept of people feathered in chains, chained to the carrying out of a greater project and the subduing of their will and well-being into the completion of this project. Notice then that it is not wrong that you have in many of your traditions connected the image of ancient Egypt with the image of slavery, even though you are now discovering that the practical details of it were much more nuanced. You still intuitively realize that the image of the Pharaoh, the God King, is one that requires a mass of subjects that he is able to dominate at will. And these were some of the first separations. It is true that the Levantine settlers who settled in the upper Nile Valley in a period of around some 3,500 years ago, these people underwent a process of subjugation, and this is the tradition or the trauma of which the tales of Exodus in your Bible spring. And it is from this trauma that the humans created the image of a divine authority lording over them as a protector. Now what you are realizing is that you need to protect yourselves. That is to say, that each and every one of you has to realize their unique part in the process of separation of reintegration. You are all carriers of both universal but also specific cultural and social energies, and these energies are trying to resolve themselves. And this is why even those of you who are perhaps far removed from both the traumas and the legacy of slavery, you still feel this great upheaval of pain and turmoil, because what is done by the perpetrator is directly felt by the victim, but it returns in many changed forms to that person who offended his brother. It returns in the form of guilt and more violence, both internally and externally. Notice that racism, when brought to its extreme, such as in the Holocaust or in the suppression of the descendant of black slaves of Africa in the colonial empires of the New World and other places on the planet, this turns out and into a death cult, ultimately. It is not anymore essentially an endeavor to make one class the master of another and then to benefit from this caste system. It becomes instead the need to destroy the world, to change the environment into one of profit, because the guilt that builds from this violence, from this evil that requires to somehow to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be resolved, this guilt is one that destroys the world before it relinquishes its grip on it. Notice, for instance, that the mortality rate has been climbing in America. It is the result of what is known as deaths of despair. And it is this despair that has come home to seek out the descendants of those who benefited directly from slavery and who still benefit, in quotation marks, from the separation of other people into classes that they can feel superior to in order to feel a little less hopeless about their own desperate existence. But the process and the legacy of slavery is a long one. It took a long time to develop, and when we say that this needs to be resolved on a planetary level, notice that the African continent is the sacred heart space of the planet. It is warm, it is teeming with life, and it holds the mysteries of infinite creation. The paranoia around AIDS was, for instance, quickly connected to the paranoia of strange diseases emerging from the African jungle and being spread to the civilized nations by degenerate subcultures such as needle addicts and homosexuals. This is underlining the paranoia of the part of the human species where civilization has taken its farthest toll. Notice that civilization, and by civilization we mean something quite negative. We mean the separation of people into social orders where they are reduced more to functions and to the identity with the symbols that are imposed by the order they live in, than they are allowed to live in harmony with their own self. And so this separation plays out as racism. And it is often in the far reaches of this planet where people have been isolated for a long time that the sense of racism was most easily developed. For instance, in the Eurasian steppelands, where the first Aryans tamed their horses, these people became obsessed with the notion of power from above, and so they spread out to dominate. And they built, for instance, in India, a caste system that was also highly racist and which still persists in some degree to this day. It also reached a peak in an area where we are coming through now, these regions of land around the Baltic, where white people suffered meager existences and dreamt of the opportunity to somehow go to exotic lands and violate the peoples and take their treasures in order to benefit themselves. This was born out of a sense of extreme need and therefore extreme hunger for the delights of the world. Then notice that a way to combat racism on the practical level of your individual life is to stop feeding the hunger within you. You all know this cessation or this sensation that has no cessation. It is the longing for diversion. It is the thrill of the fear of the information you receive through your electronic channels. It is the rush of carbohydrates. It is chasing something outside of yourself, status, identity, possessions. This will, by necessity, always shut you off from your fellow brothers and sisters, because you are one family, and the heart space of the African continent is the heart space where the planet has turned its violence and its need for extortion, exactly because this is the part of your collective psyche that you are denying. And we may pose to you that there is, of course, some energetic differences in the different adaptations human beings have made physically to the environments they have lived in around the planet. Notice, for instance, that white skin is one that reflects sunlight, while black skin is one that absorbs it. This is simply the nature of the way the universe is structured in color. But it would be absurd to assign a value system to this, because the balance is always in the middle of each and every individual, and that is where the light shines to the world, and every human being holds the potential for stepping into that light. But notice that what the balance you are striving for is requiring of you is for the people who were born of the cold to warm themselves up, and for the people who were born of the heat to cool themselves down. And you will see a day, we promise you, within 3 generations, this will be a strange and odd chapter of your pre-ascension history, and you will look back at it, not with shame, but with the understanding that it was the separation of shame that brought you to commit these extremities toward each other. It will end, it will change. What you are seeing now is the flowering of the human heart. And this is exactly expressed in the sentence, "I can't breathe," which has been heard over and over again from these murder victims who were killed by authority in its most corrupted form. Because you are all longing to breathe, and those who have been enslaved have kept that instinct alive for the rest of you, who have suffered in an inner slavery so long that you have forgotten that you yourself have built a cage in which you have become the prisoner of yourself. Such is the fate of anyone who takes prisoners. They end up having to guard themselves and to relinquish their own freedom to lord it over those they have stolen it from. So we will bless you and let you know that the people all around the planet who are now expressing themselves and being honest and open about what their heart, their consciousness, and their dreams for a better world are calling for. Please follow that instinct within yourselves, and it will lead you far quicker than you can imagine to a place where these things are recognized for the hurtful and painful separations that they are. We love you so much, human beings. We treasure you and the work you are doing on behalf of all conscious beings in this galaxy and in many other worlds. May you find strength, resilience, hope, and ultimately joy, bliss, and prosperity in this life and in all lifetimes, in your own life and in the lives of all the human beings, brother, sister, beings you share this planet with. The world is growing smaller, but its heart is growing bigger. Blessed are you, sweet, beloved creatures. We will talk to you another day. For now, farewell.